All right, hello, Honors 410. Happy Friday. We're at a point in the class where I know there's a lot going on. I referenced that in my written comments leading into yesterday's class. So I wanted to start out today just by kind of doing some kind of catch up and housekeeping work to kind of check in about where we are on various aspects of the class and kind of arrive at some content for today. The input for me in regards to content for today's class is going to be relatively minimal, in part just because I want to make sure there's room for us to engage with our final group-led discussion, as well as the communal writing project submissions we have for today. So most of what I'm going to be over is going to be a little bit more logistical in nature. I'm going to introduce some open-ended questions related to Horse Girl. But then otherwise kind of leave it to the student work. So first of all, I just wanted to address where we are in the reading. So we have Adam Nemet's We Can Save Us All. So for this book, I assigned the first 60 pages to be due for today, and I hope most folks are able to keep up with that reading pace. Again, the way I've kind of split this one up for the most part is larger reading assignments that fall on more or less alternating class days or with a weekend in between them to give some time to be able to read. But just be mindful, if you're the kind of person who tends to just do the reading the night before or the day of, that's going to be difficult for this one because they are good 50, 60 page chunks in general that I'm assigning. But so for these first 60 pages, sort of similar to what we did with Rain, I'm considering the first part of this just sort of almost a benchmark, a place to have gotten to in the reading. Please carry on, keep up. For next time, please read up to page 112, and that will keep you on pace. You can still do a reading response journal for 1 through 60, as well as a reading response journal for the second segment of this thing. But I'm going to hold off on actually hosting a discussion about this text until next time. So that will give you a chance to, again, catch up on the first 112 pages of reading for Monday's class, and then I assure you we will drill into it a little bit more. If you would like to use Nemet for your critical essays, that is absolutely fair game, but by no means required. So with that's a good segue to talking about the critical essay assignment. So again, I did share the assignment prompt. It was on Wednesday's class, and the grade guide to go with it. That's also available for you to view on Canvas in the actual assignment folder there. So make sure you're reading over the prompt and grade guide. While I did give a kind of talk through of the essentials of the assignment in that previous video lecture, I also recognize that it's the kind of assignment where it helps to just kind of read through the instructions, and I give some ideas of kinds of things you might consider. This is meant to be really open-ended. I know when you hear critical essay, you probably don't think, oh, this is going to be fun. But part of my vision for this assignment is you take the tools you've kind of accumulated in previous classes like Honors 100 and Honors 110 and apply those critical essay skills to something that's just more of your own interest. So something along the lines of, again, what speculative fiction does, why it's kind of valuable or why it's potentially problematic. Feel free to go more specifically into just one particular text if you're so inclined. That's absolutely fine. You get pretty granular with this thing as well. But meant to be open-ended, as long as it's an argumentative essay, with a clear thesis statement, and you're just kind of making that argument using the text to your advantage. And again, this isn't really meant to include external research, though again, if you have sources you've come upon that feel really integral to what you'd like to say, or if you have an outside piece of media like an episode of a TV show or a movie or an outside book that you've read, do you feel would really speak to this discussion. I'm not closed off to those ideas, but please do let me know by the end of the weekend if that's what you're planning and give me some sense of what you're thinking, so I can just kind of give you kind of a go ahead on that. I'm hoping no one will kind of surprise me by doing that, again, just because the main reason why I'm putting this limitation on the assignment is if you bring in too many external sources, there is a real risk of kind of losing your voice in a paper this short. And so I think focusing on just the texts from our class and your own thoughts and kind of forging an argument out of that for most of you is going to give you the opportunity to write a pretty rich paper, I hope. But so just to go over a few basics of essay writing, though, because I realized I hadn't really addressed them in this class. I think a number of professors for Honors 410, we kind of assume you've mastered a lot of elements of the critical essay by this point. But I know for many of you, especially those of you who are not, majoring in the humanities or in English or, things along those lines, these might be tools that you used only in Honors 100 and 110 that you're kind of rusty on. So first and foremost, again, I already said this, a few times, but making sure you have a clear thesis statement. Ordinarily, by default, this will be the sentence at the end of your introduction paragraph. It can be, a couple sentences. It could conceivably not be the very last sentence of that paragraph, but it should be something that clearly states an argument. That's kind of the most essential piece of it, and moreover, that's an argument that you're going to make over the course of the essay. From there, in your body paragraphs, think about length. Keep an eye on it. I tend to say that if a body paragraph is going much over half a page, and especially if it's going over a full page, you can probably afford to break it up. And some of that I think people can think is sort of an arbitrary distinction about length. There's certainly published books with single paragraphs that run much longer than a page. In this genre of writing, though, in academic writing, and specifically where we are now and with a paper of this length, if you just sort of write the whole thing as one big paragraph, it really is kind of weakening your ability to organize this thing in a recognizable fashion, to help me be able to follow your argument and to keep your ideas kind of organized for your own sake. So break up those paragraphs. Make sure, again, if a paragraph is going over a page, it really warrants some critical thought of, could we break this up? Because a lot of times that's a signal that either you're wedging too much content in, so the paragraph isn't very well focused, or you've just got some fluff there where you could actually just afford to chop out some pieces and it'll be a stronger paragraph for just being that much more tightly focused and clearly saying what you want to say. The other big thing I want to mention is topic sentences. Anyone who stayed with me previously, I know, has heard a lot about topic sentences, and I expect for most of you, though, whoever you took, again, Honors 100, Honors 110 with, you probably heard some things about topic sentences. Topic sentences are the first sentence of each body paragraph, so not including the introduction, not including the conclusion. The topic sentence leads off that body paragraph, and ideally it's doing three things, and they won't have to do all three every single time. At absolute minimum, it's introducing the content of that paragraph. So basically, it's like a sub-thesis saying this is what this paragraph is about, right? Secondarily, ideally, it's giving us some connection back to the thesis statement. In some cases, that's really implicitly clear. You don't need to come out and state it. But a lot of times, if you're having trouble connecting your topic sentence to your thesis, that's a huge red flag that means that this doesn't actually relate to your thesis very well. So either you need to go back and rework that thesis, or maybe this concept of this paragraph isn't so great, and that's what needs to be revised. So again, it'll lead off, it'll introduce the topic of that paragraph, it'll tie back to your thesis, and if it's really clicking on all cylinders, the other thing that it'll do is provide a transition between paragraphs. So giving us a few words to kind of relate back to the previous paragraph's content and make it a bridge to the new paragraph's content. Again, not every topic sentence will necessarily do all three of those things. Sometimes that would result in some really long and unwieldy topic sentences. But should I really be doing at least two out of those three things? And again, if there are opportunities to do all three, that's for the best. So I'm going to leave some of this in written form in the post as well, because I know that sometimes that's easier for people to access. If we were here in a classroom meeting physically, I would be putting this all on the screen and giving you some examples as we went. So I recognize I can't do that in quite the same way, but I'll try to give you some additional tools to help with that. And apologies, I know for some of you that this might be a little elementary and you might have this well in hand, but I want to give those resources and make sure we have an opportunity to succeed on that. For the critical essay, if you would like to send me your thesis statement or even an outline or a particular paragraph you're working on, it's going to be difficult for me to review full papers for people before the due date at this point. But if you can send me anything along those lines, if you find that helpful, if you're feeling a little bit uncertain about it, please feel free to, especially by the end of the weekend. I'll have an eye on email here and there over the weekend. To be transparent, I won't be on it as much as I am during the week, but I expect at least a couple times throughout the day and over the weekend, I'll be checking that email and can get back to you with some feedback if that's helpful to you. If it's not helpful to you, if you're feeling really confident or you've kind of already got this in the bag, you kind of have a good draft and you're just kind of polishing at this point, more power to you. I'm not going to hold it against you if you haven't asked for my feedback in advance. I think that's great if you're able to do it on your own at this point. But again, if this is not really your wheelhouse, not something you're super comfortable with, I welcome you to send me, again, partial drafts, outlines, or just a thesis statement, that sort of thing. And I'll do my best to get you some feedback pretty quickly, just kind of let you know, yep, you're on the right track, give you that reassurance, or help kind of, correct it if I think it's way off course at this point. But okay, so moving on from the critical essay though, for today's class, so we have group-led discussion video on number 4. So far, these have been great. Kudos to all the students, all your hard work, all your collaboration on these. It's one of those things where I think in doing this class fully online, that I was a little bit concerned that even last semester, students at least had a chance to meet each other and get to know each other before I had them doing projects like this. So going into this cold, where I know some of you are, I'm sure, are friends outside of this class, but many of you may not really know each other. Or know the partners you were assigned to. I've been impressed with all the work you've done, and so thank you for the clear effort on that. So please be sure to check out group-led video discussion 4 below, and we'll respond to that in the discussion thread. Additionally, communal writing projects have been moving along really nicely from what I've seen, so we have part 3 of all 3 tracks posted below. So again, please continue to read those, and I've been really pleased with the discussion that's been, supportive of each other, because I know it's a daunting thing for a lot of us to share creative writing, especially in this kind of rough form with other people. So I appreciate, us all staying, positive and supportive there, but also being really insightful and sharing some observations about, what we observe, what we like, what we speculate might happen next. I think that discussion by and large has been really good. But okay, so the other main thing I want to get into before we talk about Horse Girl for today is the workshop drafts and the other kind of tandem assignments that go with that. So this is where I made brief mention of it in the written comments yesterday, mostly just because I wanted to get ahead of things a little bit and not completely blindside people. So for this workshop draft assignment, we've done the communal writing project work where we're kind of halfway through it at this point. For this workshop draft, we're actually writing our own full-fledged short story that is of a similar ilk. So we're kind of setting it in a real-world setting, but then also adding speculative elements, which again can be things like elements of fantasy, science fiction, horror, magical realism, time travel, apocalypse, anything along those lines is fair game, and please make it your own. Again, part of my intention here is, while I want you to take it seriously and do your best work, also have fun with it, right? The nature of an assignment like this is inviting you to do something that you'll actually enjoy. So, be creative, kind of flex those muscles if you don't have the chance to in your other academic work. But I'm putting the prompt to this assignment below. I'm just going to kind of walk us through the general pieces of it. You can read in more detail what it says there, but just to resolve some questions proactively, I hope, but please feel free to weigh in with questions below as well. So for this assignment, I'm asking everyone to draft a story 4 to 6 pages in length. And again, I suggested this be set in the real world or, an imagined version of it, but not just sort of a full-fledged fantasy science fiction universe. So starting in kind of a more real world and then adding, some of those speculative elements that we talked about in there. The main reason why I don't want for it to be just a full-fledged fantasy world that you invent, for example, is that process of world building, which I'm sure is a term many of us have heard before, is an interesting one, a compelling one, I think a worthwhile one. The thing is, in a 5-page-ish story, it's almost impossible to world build and then actually tell a story, right? If you look at kind of, the great, fantasy and science fiction novels, the reason they're able to do so much world building is because they have, 200, 300, 400 pages to work with. So if they spend, 10 pages establishing the rules of this world and giving us the setting, there's still so much time to still be able to tell a story. in a 5-page story, you just don't have the space to do that, right? So if you start with the real world that we all kind of understand already, you can add, again, an element or two of, fantasy or science fiction or horror or whatever genre you'd like to get into, without it kind of just eating up all of your page space and still giving you plenty of room to have a good character-driven story. So for these submissions, it's going to be staggered due dates, and again, it's going to be starting. Let me check my notes here. So starting Friday, July 31st, so a week from today, and then it's going to be roughly 3 students a day submitting until we get to Monday, August 10th. We'll have only 1 student submitting. So the concept here is that students are submitting work, and then the next class day we're having a discussion of that work. So during that time, there's going to be 1 reading assignment that's kind of hinging over from We Can Save Us All. You'll have a good 2 weeks to be able to complete, so plenty of time on that. But otherwise, your reading assignments for class are no longer going to be, from the books or a separate PDF that I upload, but rather from your peers' work. And we're going to spend those classes talking about the work, and some of it will still be that kind of, supportive, positive feedback we've been doing with the communal writing project. But this is also where we can get a little more critical. Not to say we're going to be mean or disparage anyone personally or anything like that. But rather, this part of the class is designed to kind of, demonstrate what could be even better about these stories, right? And many of you were good about pointing out things, even in the Joe Hill novellas, that, didn't really resonate with you as well, or that, didn't meet your aesthetic. So that kind of stuff is totally fair game here. But all the more so, we're just kind of looking at, stories on their own terms, and whether they're as successful as they can be. Even excellent stories, even A-level stories, always have some level for improvement. I'll be transparent. I have never encountered a student story that didn't have some room for improvement. I've never written a first draft that I would suggest didn't have some room for improvement. So we can always have some degree of critical discussion there, as well as discussing the positives again, though. Because I'll also say on the other side of that, I don't think I've ever read a student draft that had nothing redeeming about it. Right? There's always some elements that are working, and those are worth kind of encouraging each other on and letting us know what we're doing well. And oftentimes we can see that better in other people's work than we can in our own, which is part of the spirit of doing this workshop model. So in regards to this workshop draft, I'm posting kind of what the schedule looks like in text below. What I'd like for you to do no later than Monday, 11 a.m., and ideally as soon as you reasonably can, is send me your preferences about this. So if you're the kind of person who likes to just kind of get this thing out of the way, get it over with, or you already have a story idea, or you even already have started writing a story, by all means, feel free to jump on an early date and say, I want to go as soon as possible. By the flip side, if you have no ideas yet and you're really daunted by this, you're super busy for the next, week or so, you may want to try to go as late as possible in this process. I've found in general, if students just send me their preferences, that specific dates that do or do not work for them, and or a general idea of I'd like to go early, late, or in the middle, usually we can work it out to more or less honor to everyone's preferences, or only a very small handful of students have to make meaningful compromises. So I'll handle these for the most part on a first come, first served basis. If someone tells me, specifically I have, some medical procedure or some, pre-planned family trip where I just know that those couple days are really, really bad for me, I will try to honor those even, outside of the first come, first serve order. But otherwise, I'll just take them as preferences and again, handle them first come, first serve. My intention is if everyone can get back to me by Monday at 11, and again, I'll assume anyone who hasn't gotten back to me by then genuinely doesn't care. They're just saying like, nope, any date's fine with me. That I'll go ahead and plug people into a schedule, and that on Monday I'll be able to post what that schedule is, so you'll know what your due dates are moving forward after that. So I hope that's clear enough. Again, there's some notes below that I hope will clarify that even more. But you're signing up for which day you will upload your story, your workshop draft, and then I will put those again up on Canvas like I've been doing for the communal writing project for your peers to be able to read for the following class. I'll talk more about the other stages of this assignment. They're all included in that same prompt that I've uploaded below. But basically, your responsibility when we start this process is to read all of your peers' work and leave at least one comment on each story that you're reading. And again, it could be a combination of positive feedback, critical feedback, questions, and somewhere in between, engaging with each other in discussion like we've been doing up to this point. And then the final stage of this thing will be the revised draft, where basically you're taking the feedback that I gave you, because I'll give everyone some more extensive written feedback as well, and taking the feedback from the discussion and making some meaningful changes. Demonstrating kind of the effort. To be transparent, for the workshop draft, if you turn it in on time and within the parameters of the assignment, you're probably going to earn full credit, the full 10 points or very close to it for that assignment. For the revised draft, I am going to be more critical. So I am grading that based on the quality of the final product, but also just kind of demonstrated effort, how clear it is that you worked hard to take that feedback seriously and result in a better story. And that's going to be due on our very last day of class. And that's a relatively highly weighted assignment. So the workshop draft is worth 10 points. The workshop participation is kind of an extension of our usual engagement and participation score, but that's worth 10 points in and of itself. And the revised draft is worth 20. So that's the final product. As an incentive to try to get in early for workshop, the real upside of that is that means you have the most time to be able to revise it. So, for those of you who submit on the very first submission date, and then we discuss your story on Monday, August 3rd, then you've got nearly 2 weeks to be able to revise your story, which is a pretty healthy amount of time for this sort of process. For those of you who go on the last couple dates, you're going to have less than a week to be able to do that final revision, which should actually work out because you've had the most time to be able to do your first draft. So hopefully you've already worked out some of the kinks on your own. You have a stronger product you're giving us then, but you're only going to have whatever 3 or 4 days to be able to manage that revision. So again, you have the advantage of having a larger gap and more time to write it, but the disadvantage of having less time to be able to revise. So I'll talk more about this as it all comes up. But again, please send me your preferences, whatever they may be, in terms of an early, middle, late in this process you'd like to go, or if you have specific date preferences, I'd be happy to hear those. And send those over email or Canvas message, and we will work from there. But okay, so the last piece for today, and I know I'm going a little long on this video, so I appreciate everyone bearing with me here. For Horse Girl, I'm not going to give us a ton of super prescriptive questions, in part because it's different than reading a text where I can take you to specific pages. I could take you to specific timestamps in the movie, but I feel as though that's a little bit more burdensome to ask you to open up your Netflix and scroll through for a specific time. Although feel free to do that if you want to bring up observations or quotes that speak to a specific time. But my questions are going to be a little bit more broad in nature. So just to run through them, the first one I want to ask is just kind of our main character Sarah, played by Alison Brie. What do we think actually happened to her? Right? Because I think that we can understand this on at least 2 separate levels. If we want to go kind of full believer, Fox Mulder style, we can say, I totally believe that this is a story that involves aliens, that involves cloning. There's some degree of debate about what even happens within that framework, but we can accept this all as very much a kind of science fiction realm, and all this stuff happens. On the opposite end of that spectrum, we can say that this all happened in her head. This is all kind of a psychiatric episode that she's going through. And I think we can understand this movie either way. I don't think that the filmmakers give us necessarily a definitive read on that. So some of it is up to kind of our personal aesthetics and how we want to read this thing. Although we can certainly pick up on details that we would suggest support our point of view. Along those lines, I want to ask, are we sympathetic to this character? She certainly is introduced as sort of a for lack of a better way of saying, kind of odd person. I would suggest a quirky person. What we kind of make of her. Do we feel for her? Do we identify with her? What our reactions are there. There's that date that she has with the roommate of her roommate's boyfriend. I don't know what you do call it, her roommate-in-law maybe. But there's that guy she goes on the date with that is one of the most awkward dates I've ever seen depicted on film, right? When she starts to kind of unravel everything that she's been experiencing or believes, it takes him to dig up this body. It's such a bizarre set of circumstances, right? Where if you're right there with her and you kind of fully believe in her end of the story, I can see being sympathetic to her because she's just trying to connect with someone, have them help her unravel this mystery. On the flip side, you could just kind of perceive it to be nuts, right? This guy's in way over his head, that she's put him in this impossible situation, and ultimately not not feel as sympathetic to her. We talked about this a little bit in the live session yesterday, so thanks for everyone who turned up for that. I think we had a really good discussion while we had some folks there. But about Sarah's connection to this horse and what we make of that. It's certainly unusual, right? And there's this concept of someone being a horse girl, which beyond the title of the movie, that just being a label that they're to put on people. What's the connotation of that? We talked about that in the live discussion a little bit yesterday. I think it's a term that a number of people at least are familiar with at this point. How that might apply to Sarah, or how she kind of subverts our understanding of that, I think it'd be interesting to look at. What we make of Sarah's obsession with this TV show. So this TV show with the devil, that she seems to have kind of an unhealthy sort of relationship almost with, where she kind of relates everything in her life to it. I don't think that's that unbelievable. I think even if we put aside, again, potential psychiatric issues that are going on with her, psychological issues, still, I think that a lot of us kind of, we get really into the shows that we're really into. But the show is called Purgatory, which I didn't notice until repeated viewings of it, which in and of itself I think might have something to say about the movie and Sarah's situation. I'd be really interested to hear any interpretations of that. But then, and the last, big kind of open-ended question I wanted to throw out to the class is just sort of ultimately what we make of this movie, what we take away from it, what it might teach us, how it sort of adds additional material to consider to the readings we've been doing, but also sort of what we make of it in terms of how we kind of wrap our heads around what happened, or what it says to some of our previous material that we've encountered in this class. So again, wide open how you want to interpret it. I'd be eager to hear other impressions. I'll be transparent. This is the first time I've taught this film, in part because it only came out this past spring, or maybe the winter, or whenever it was. But it hasn't been out long. It's a relatively new film. So I expected probably most of you had not seen it yet going into this. But yeah, so reactions to it, I'd love to hear what we think. But okay, so I have gone over the time that I like to go with these videos. Appreciate your patience in engaging with all of this, and still also watching the group-led discussion video as well. Thanks, everyone. And again, please feel free to chime in with questions. I know this is a very busy point in the session, but I think it's manageable. I think we can all kind of, just as long as we can just kind of keep on top of what the obligations are for the class. It's not going to be something more than you can handle. It's just a lot to keep track of. So thank you again, and have a great weekend. And I'll check in with you all on Monday.